The orchestrated path to war. How global elites manipulated the Ukrainian conflict. The ongoing war in Ukraine did not emerge in a vacuum. Rather, it was the result of deliberate geopolitical maneuvering orchestrated by powerful global elites. The Rothschild and Rockefeller families, with their extensive financial and political influence, handpicked Volodymyr Zelensky as Ukraine's leader, using him as a pawn to escalate tensions with Russia. The Biden administration played a key role in supporting this strategy, ensuring that the conflict would serve Western interests. However, this plan was not a spontaneous reaction to Russian actions. It had been in the making for decades. Visionaries of U.S. foreign policy, such as Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, laid the foundation for war by pushing for NATO expansion, fully aware that it would provoke Russia into military action. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer is part of the same cabal owned by the Rothschilds, much like Boris Johnson, who ran to break the peace agreement in 2022 in Istanbul, ensuring that the conflict would continue. This essay examines the historical trajectory of the Ukrainian conflict and the forces that worked to bring it about despite the foreseeable catastrophic consequences. The role of Zelensky, a manufactured leader. The meteoric rise of Volodymyr Zelensky from a comedian to Ukraine's president was no accident. His ascent was carefully managed by powerful Western financial and political elites, notably the Rothschild and Rockefeller families, who saw in him a malleable figure willing to align Ukraine's policies with their geopolitical aims. His presidency was backed by Western institutions and oligarchs like Ihor Kolomoisky, who had deep ties to international financial networks. Once in power, Zelensky adopted an aggressively pro-NATO stance, despite the historical warnings from Russian leadership that such moves would be considered existential threats. The Biden administration's role in escalating conflict. The Biden-led U.S. played a crucial role in escalating tensions. From the moment Biden took office, his administration aggressively pushed military aid to Ukraine, ensuring that the country was prepared for a prolonged confrontation with Russia. Billions of dollars in arms and military training were provided, reinforcing Ukraine's position as a Western military outpost. The infamous phone call between Biden and Zelensky in early 2022, where Biden assured full U.S. backing, demonstrated the extent to which Washington was invested in sustaining the conflict. The American mainstream media, controlled by corporate elites with ties to global financial interests, relentlessly framed Russia as the sole aggressor while ignoring the years of NATO encroachment that provoked Moscow's response. The role of Victoria Nuland in Ukraine's war. Victoria Nuland, a key figure in U.S. foreign policy, played a pivotal role in orchestrating the conditions for war. As the U.S. Under-Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Nuland was instrumental in the 2014 Ukrainian coup, which led to the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych. Her infamous leaked phone call, where she discussed handpicking Ukraine's next government with the phrase F***** the EU, exposed the extent of U.S. intervention in Ukrainian politics. Nuland actively promoted NATO expansion, worked closely with Ukrainian nationalist groups, and facilitated the massive U.S. military aid packages to Ukraine. Her long-standing animosity toward Russia and her role in shaping aggressive U.S. policy ensured that Ukraine would be at the forefront of a geopolitical struggle designed to weaken Moscow. Kissinger and Brzezinski's strategy of NATO expansion. The foundation for today's war was laid long before Zelensky's presidency. Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, two of the most influential U.S. foreign policy strategists, had long championed NATO's eastward expansion as a means to contain Russia. Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, 1997, explicitly argued that controlling Ukraine was key to undermining Russian influence in Eurasia. Kissinger, while publicly cautious, was instrumental in shaping policies that encouraged post-Cold War NATO expansion, knowing that such a move would eventually force Russia into defensive aggression. NATO's expansion was pursued despite repeated warnings from both Western and Russian diplomats. In 1990, U.S. Secretary of State James Baker famously assured Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would move not 1 inch eastward. However, this promise was blatantly disregarded, with NATO incorporating former Soviet states into its fold, culminating in discussions to include Ukraine, a move Russia consistently warned would cross a red line. The The consequences: a war that could have been avoided. The predictable outcome of these geopolitical maneuvers was war. Russia, feeling encircled and under existential threat, launched its military operation in Ukraine in February 2022. Western powers, rather than seeking diplomatic resolution, doubled down on their support for Ukraine, prolonging the conflict and causing massive destruction and suffering. The sanctions imposed on Russia backfired, exacerbating global economic instability and energy shortages. Europe, particularly Germany, suffered the consequences of cutting off Russian energy supplies, while the U.S. military-industrial complex reaped enormous profits from continued arms sales. Conclusion: the Ukrainian war was not an inevitable conflict born out of Russian aggression, but a deliberately provoked crisis orchestrated by powerful global elites. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers ensured that a Western-friendly puppet, Zelensky, was in place to execute their plans. The Biden administration played its role by inflaming tensions and supplying arms. Meanwhile, Kissinger and Brzezinski had long set the stage by expanding NATO toward Russia's doorstep, despite knowing the risks. Victoria Nuland's role in shaping Ukraine's pro-Western government and her aggressive stance toward Russia further cemented the conditions for war. The involvement of Keir Starmer, much like Boris Johnson, in sabotaging peace efforts shows that Western elites were never interested in resolving the conflict. The tragic reality of this war is that it could have been avoided, but for those who profit from chaos, peace was never the goal.